Hello, and welcome to Forum 360 with a global outlook and a local view. I'm Ardith Keck, your host. Our program deals with a disease we hope you never have, but it's likely that you will have someone in your family or friends with Alzheimer's disease, a dreaded disease because it robs your brain of its normal functions. Here with me to talk about Alzheimer's disease is Cheryl Kanetsky, who is the Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Association for the Greater East Ohio Akron chapter. Cheryl, help us understand Alzheimer's disease. Is it different from what we call dementia?
Yes. So Alzheimer's disease is a progressive degeneration of brain cells, and there is the formation of plaques and tangles in the brain that are often the hallmark of the disease. And over time, brain cells are dying, and it typically impacts the short-term memory part of the brain first. When we talk about Alzheimer's versus dementia, dementia is a word sometimes used interchangeably, but really dementia is a broad definition of symptoms. So other diseases can have a dementia component, but they're not Alzheimer's disease.
How is Alzheimer's disease diagnosed?
Alzheimer's is diagnosed through a ruling out process of other possible medical conditions. So when someone goes to the doctor and reports problems with their memory, and this has been going on for a period of time and maybe getting worse over time, physicians often are trying to rule out other causes of the memory problems. So things like a vitamin deficiency or anemia. They'll check the blood, they'll possibly do a CAT scan or an MRI to make sure that there's nothing else going on in the brain. If the physician looks at all the different medical aspects of what could be going on and really doesn't find anything else, the diagnosis is often probable Alzheimer's disease.
So it's process of elimination.
Process of elimination at this point. We're getting closer to having a more definitive test for Alzheimer's, but right now it's a process of elimination.
Okay. How many Americans are there with Alzheimer's disease?
There are over 5 million Americans with Alzheimer's disease, and we're really worried about this because age is the biggest risk factor for the disease, and as the baby boomers are entering the age of highest risk, which is over 65, we're anticipating this number to triple in the next 15 to 20 years.
Ooh. That's awful.
And scary.
Yes, very scary. Are men or women more likely to have the disease?
So there's some research out there trying to look at this. Right now, I think the answer is that there's more women who are affected by Alzheimer's disease, but women also tend to live longer. So one of the explanations is that that could be the reason. But current research is going on to look at the impact of hormones and other characteristics of females that also might be playing a factor into that.
And does race make a difference?
Race does make a difference. Hispanics are 1.5 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's than Caucasians, and African Americans 2 times more likely. Again, looking at reasons that could be are maybe some of the other underlying health conditions that are a contributing factor, like heart disease and diabetes and the risk for stroke.
Ooh, we need to do something about this.
We absolutely do.
Are there benefits to early detection?
Early detection is helpful on a couple different fronts. For someone who is able to get to the doctor and understand what's going on with them sooner rather than later, this can help with planning for the future. There's a lot of things that we can do, especially through the Alzheimer's Association, to help families live successfully even with the diagnosis. So doing that earlier allows more chance for success. Planning for things you want to do, making sure the legal and financial preparations are in place, and then trying to enjoy life and live it as full as possible for the amount of time that we have.
Can it be treated?
Alzheimer's disease has a few medications that are on the market that are commonly used to manage symptoms primarily. There isn't a treatment right now that is able to help the underlying cause of Alzheimer's disease. So often the treatments that are given are only effective for a short amount of time. Research is currently working on better treatments and hopefully one day a cure.
We hope so. And is there anything a person can do to avoid getting Alzheimer's disease?
So that's a great question, and we get that asked a lot. There's so much more news about Alzheimer's in the media now, and it is becoming more, the general community is more aware of it. And right now what we do know is that what's good for your heart is also good for your brain. So heart healthy tips, things that you can do to keep your brain active and strong as you get older, are lifestyle changes that have been suggested to help reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease.
Is it hereditary?
Another great question that we get a lot. I mean, Alzheimer's is, there's only a small number of cases that is hereditary with Alzheimer's, and that tends to be when someone's been diagnosed younger than 65. There's actually about 10% of those living with the disease who are diagnosed in their 40s and 50s, believe it or not. And those tend to be the cases where there's a genetic component.
Does it kill people?
Alzheimer's disease is fatal, and that is a common misconception as well. Sometimes people don't realize that having the disease is actually a life-limiting diagnosis. And what happens is, as the disease progresses in the brain and the brain cells are dying, the brain is actually shrinking. If you were to see a picture of a healthy brain about the size of a cauliflower, and then see a picture of a brain with someone who's had the disease for many, many years, the brain has shrunk, and there's actually spaces in the brain of missing brain tissue. And what happens is that when the disease impacts the part of the brain that controls our breathing, our eating, or our heart function, that's what leads to death from Alzheimer's disease.
Ooh, what's the latest on research?
So the latest on research is actually very exciting. The federal government over the last several years has quadrupled its support of Alzheimer's research funding, which has been so significant because Alzheimer's is the top 10 leading cause. It's actually a number 6 cause of death in this country, but if you look at the top 10 causes of death, Alzheimer's was by far the least funded in terms of research. So we have currently $2.3 billion that the United States government is allocated towards research. And one of the most exciting studies just came out with some interesting findings last July through the Sprint Mind study. And what it found was that for people who were able to aggressively manage their blood pressure numbers to really low compared to the American standard, were able to reduce the onset of mild cognitive impairment, which is a precursor to Alzheimer's disease, by 19%. And this was a very significant finding in research, and it has now prompted a phase 2 project looking at further blood pressure management and what that might mean to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease. So it's very exciting. We have not had something that substantial before that has been shown to potentially reduce the risk.
Now, when I was doing my research, to prepare for this show, I happened upon something about stem cell and stem cell research helping persons with Alzheimer's or something. Can you tell me about that?
I'm actually not very familiar with stem cell research. It is an area that, like so many areas, I had the fortunate opportunity to go to the Alzheimer's International Research Conference last year. There were 6,000 researchers from around the world that came to this multi-day conference presenting information and projects on every aspect of what they're looking at to make an impact in this disease. And so I apologize, I don't know much about the stem cell research, but there's so much exciting stuff
That's
going on.
just one
Yeah,
of many,
one
in
of
other
many.
words. Oh.
Sleep and hormones and the food we eat and environment. So it's getting a lot of attention, and researchers are trying to come at it from all different angles.
How is the disease being addressed statewide and in federal legislation?
So that's a great question. It's been unfortunate that Ohio has been the only state in the country that has not had an Alzheimer's state plan to address the disease. And the association chapters in Ohio for many years have worked to try to change that. And we've had a big win in February, just last month. We were able to get legislation proposed through the Senate, and if the law passes, it will allow Ohio to have an Alzheimer's state plan. And what that would mean is a task force would form to look at the impact of the disease in Ohio and what kinds of supports and structure should Ohio work to adopt to help ease the burden of the disease on the people who live in Ohio. So that's an exciting accomplishment.
Finally, huh?
Yes.
Okay. This is Ardith Keck for Forum 360 with a global outlook and a local view. And we're talking today about Alzheimer's disease. It's a terrible disease that robs the brain of its normal functions. With me is Cheryl Kanetsky, who is Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Association for the Greater East Ohio chapter. Okay, we've been talking about legislation and Ohio and federal. Is there something the feds have been doing?
Yes. So through our active advocacy efforts, the Bold Infrastructure for Alzheimer's Act was passed in December at the federal level. And what this means is that Alzheimer's now is going to be looked at as a public health issue. And it's so important we're going to be able to partner with local and state level public health entities to get the message out that the impact of this disease is so tremendous, but there is steps that the public can take to help reduce their risk. And that's going to be our message in the public health arena, and hopefully raise awareness of what people can do to stay brain healthy.
That's the Healthy Brain Initiative?
Exactly,
What it's
exactly.
called?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a whole long booklet of interesting facts about Alzheimer's.
Absolutely, and hopefully it changes the conversation as research gives us more and more data about how to live a brain healthy lifestyle and what specific kinds of things like the blood pressure study have an impact. Getting the message out to the public that what you do for your heart is good for your brain, staying active as we talked about, but how detrimental the kinds of lifestyle habits that folks may inadvertently choose can impact the risk for Alzheimer's disease. And one in particular is head safety. So the use of helmets when bike riding and any kind of traumatic brain injury, whether it's through car accidents or sports or those kinds of things, more and more research is showing that could have a negative impact on Alzheimer's disease.
So football players may be more likely to have Alzheimer's?
It's possibility.
Okay. What kinds of local services are there for families and caregivers?
Sure. So the Alzheimer's Association, being a nonprofit organization located right here in Hudson, provides programs and services for those who've been diagnosed with the disease and their caregivers. And one really important distinction is that we support folks with any form of dementia, not just Alzheimer's. So someone might have dementia from a stroke or Parkinson's disease or some other kind of illness. Most of our services are very applicable and available to them. We have a 24/7, 365-day helpline, which is a free toll-free number that folks can call and ask any question they have. Who's our...
Wanna give that number?
Sure, absolutely. 1-800-272-3900.
Okay. 800-272-3900. Do you have support groups for people?
We absolutely do. We have over 30 different support groups in the 17 counties that our chapter serves. They are run by trained volunteer facilitators who go through our training and receive support from our staff. And this is really an important service a lot of times for caregivers, where they can receive education and support from other people who are walking in their shoes, who are going through this journey as a caregiver themselves and have the benefit of their own experience to share with others. And that really makes a big difference for caregivers.
It would be helpful. How do you and other agencies get enough funds to deal with people with Alzheimer's disease?
We're fortunate in Ohio that the Ohio budget, the state budget, has an Alzheimer's respite line item in it, which allows for the chapters in Ohio to receive some funds to help offset our costs. We do grant writing, and then we have special events. We are very reliant on fundraising. So our biggest fundraiser is Walk to End Alzheimer's, which happens in the fall. But we're preparing right now for our Paint the Night Purple benefit dinner. It's a dinner and silent auction that will be coming up on April 13th. And the funds raised through that allow for our services to be free of charge.
And if someone wants to go to the gala, how do they do that?
They can go to our website at www.alz.org/East Ohio and look for the information button on there about Paint the Night Purple. Follow that link and they will find the registration and event information.
Okay. Is purple a color associated with Alzheimer's Association?
It is. Purple is our branded signature color. Anything we do out in the community, we try to be as purple as possible, just for helping with recognition, but that is Alzheimer's Association color.
I see. What's the longest day?
The longest
Is that another
day,
fundraiser?
It is. That is our newest signature event. And the longest day that happens on the summer solstice, June 21st, is in commemoration of caregivers, and often the long experience of caregivers who sacrifice their time and love to care for their family members. And so this event is a do-it-yourself event. Someone can plan a bake sale, a bike ride, a golf tournament, anything that they'd like to do in honor or in memory of their family member with Alzheimer's. And the funds that are raised, again, go to the chapter and help us keep our services free of charge.
Is there a reason for early data collection? Does it help to have data collection?
In terms of the public diagnosis?
In terms of people who have Alzheimer's, or when they get it, or how they get it, or whatever.
Sure. So going to the doctor and having a medical professional help you through this allows the data of how this disease is impacting our community to be recorded. And so that helps us to determine how many people are affected by this. In our 17 counties, we have 60,000 people who are estimated to be living with Alzheimer's. And so what that means is about 250,000 caregivers. So the data helps to inform our strategy as an organization and helps us to understand what kinds of advocacy activities we need to get involved with to create more of a support structure.
Does a person with early diagnosed Alzheimer's disease, say they go to the doctor and he or she determines that it probably is Alzheimer's, because I guess it's a probably at that point, do they want to know they have it? Is that generally the case?
It's kind of mixed. I think there's a lot of stigma still with Alzheimer's disease, and people can show fear or being uncomfortable with even telling other people that they have concern about their memory. For other people, though, they know that something's been going on for a long time and that they've worked so hard to try to cover and mask maybe the symptoms or their memory problems. And so sometimes going to the doctor and getting it identified and sort of naming the elephant in the room can be a relief. And now we know what we're dealing with. Now we can plan for the future. Now we can get the support and the help from family and friends who are often very willing to give that.
And from the Alzheimer's Association, I assume.
Absolutely.
Is there adequate training for caregivers and health workers and people in the position of helping Alzheimer's patients?
From the stories we hear from families who are using these services, the training is not always adequate. And that's one of our priorities at the state level, is to have some increased regulations and requirements for training for home health care workers, staff in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. Right now, the requirements very small number of hours, just specific to Alzheimer's and dementia. And what we really feel is that in order to give good care, the staff needs to be better trained. And we're working on trying to get that put in place.
Do you get reports of Alzheimer's disease patients who are abused as a result of their disease?
Our organization doesn't get the reports specifically, but it always is in our attention when something comes into the news. We work closely with the Ohio Department on Aging and the area agencies on aging to create as many support structures for families as possible. Sometimes the abuse is a result of a very stressed out caregiver or support system that isn't able to adequately care for that individual. And through working with our organization or others, we can reduce the risk of abuse.
There are often, with Alzheimer's that I'm familiar with, is a long period of time. Often they, as you have indicated, you go from early onset into other stages, and it can be forever, seemingly forever, especially for the caregiver,
Sure.
to have this person ill. So I imagine that caregivers would be highly stressed.
Yes. And there's a significant financial component to this. Currently, Medicare and many insurance companies don't offer coverage for just the day-to-day care of someone with this disease. And so it's often an out-of-pocket expense for families to secure and pay for outside help to come in to assist, and that's very stressful.
And of course, when the time comes that the caregiver can no longer take care of the person, institutionalizing them is a horrible part of all this. They don't want to do that, but it's necessary.
Sometimes it is necessary, and you know, we that's one of the things that we do at the chapter is really work with families one-on-one, if that's what they'd like, and help them to create a plan. So if their goal is to stay at home for as long as possible, our staff and our social workers help that family reach that goal, and then address the time where that's no longer safe or possible, and help make a transition into another care environment, whether that's nursing home or an assisted living, and help them do that as smoothly as possible.
This has been an informative talk for me, and I appreciate your coming. We wish you well with the research to end Alzheimer's disease. What a wonderful world that would be. Many thanks, Cheryl. This is Ardith Keck for Forum 360, a global outlook and a local view.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Electric Impulse Communications, Blue Green, and Forum 360 supporters.